let's give a warm introduction and welcome to Table for One with Alex Lover.
Table for One, Alex Lover.
That's me. I'm sorry I'm late. I got mobbed by a group of people in these really elaborate medieval costumes, and they started yelling at me to roll dice. It was very strange. So it's been about a week since our last date, you know? And I've been talking with my therapist because my therapist says I talk a lot, and that's saying something coming from somebody whose job is to get talked at for a while. But he said that since I talk so much and I don't want to be a burden or anything, I should start asking more questions. Thank you.
Of course. Will there be anything else, miss?
We'll see what I get.
Perfect, thank you.
My therapist urged me to ask more questions in order to get whoever I'm talking to, more engaged. Whenever I ask a question, I want you to respond with the first thing that comes to mind. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. I'm very excited for this. I've got... Ooh, what are these? Oh, marshmallows. I like these. So, we've been dating for about a month now, right? And I think that it's about time for us to, go back to our roots. When we first met, because I know that you know that story because obviously you were there, but have you ever heard my version of it?
No.
No? Well, let's settle in for a wonderful ride here because this is the interesting tale of how you and I first met. I'm trying to remember what I was doing. Do you remember? I think I told you. What was I doing?
Walking across the street.
Right. I was walking across the street, and suddenly I saw him. He had this dangerous look on his face. Oh, thank you. I suppose this is the appetizer and this is the meal then, right? So I was walking across the street and I saw him there. He had this mean look on his face and he had a knife, like the kind that people mug people with. And I looked at him and I said, "Why are you pointing that knife at me, sir?" And he sort of scowled and held his knife closer and he said, "You're coming with me, Alex Lover." I think he said a reason, but I don't remember what it is. Do you know?
We need your help.
We need your help, Alex Lover. And he was threatening me with a knife, which was a very interesting thing to do when you're asking for somebody's help. So I follow this man, and he takes me to this building. How large was it?
Warehouse size.
It was warehouse size. It was this giant warehouse. Oh my goodness. Oh, I might want to start reading a few of these. This one has no note. This one also has no note. And this one, I don't know what kind of candy bar this is. I'm not a connoisseur. And this one says "Go for it." Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I approached this giant warehouse of a building. It wasn't quite a warehouse, but it was about the size of one. It had these giant smokestacks billowing smoke out of it. I think it was a factory, but I can't be sure because I never asked. So he brought me to this building, and he went up to the door, and he greeted this man. I think there was a code word of some kind. Do you know what it is?
Toys R Us.
He went up to the door, he knocked 4 times and went, "Toys R Us." And the person who was working in the movies, they have those doors with the slot in the middle so that you can like open it and peer out at anybody. It looks really creepy in person, actually, because it's just a pair of eyes. So that I was sort of taken aback by this. And so he knocks, he says, "Toys R Us," and the other man says, "What are you ordering?" And the guy says, "I need 2 stuffed giraffes." And then we entered the building. So the man with the scowl on his face was a very interesting character. You know, he had this eye patch, and he was wearing this dark suit jacket and dress pants and everything. And he really looked like he was going to stab me with that knife, which is the reason why I came along. I still don't know why he was threatening me with that knife. Do you remember?
You needed your help.
Right, it was because he needed my help.
Only you could fix it.
Only I could fix the problem that was brewing. So, I believe I'm using the wrong utensil for this.
What is it?
It's chips. You know, this is a delicacy where I come from. So, he brings me into this warehouse, this man with the suit jacket and the eye patch. And the man behind the door is this kind of scraggly-looking old man with this long beard. And the 2 of them take us to this sort of like table in the middle of this factory. And so they lay out this really complex map of the city, and there's all these like circles and crosses and arrows on everything. It looked like, like those coaches when they coach football. They have that whiteboard with all the X's and the O's on it. It was sort of like that. And I'll never forget what he said to me. Do you remember what he said to me?
You are the chosen one.
Zombie.
You are the chosen one. He says, "Alex Lover, you are the chosen one. You are the only one who can save us from the predicament that we are in." Oh, thank you very much. Going to read the note while this is here. "You're doing amazingly well. Thank you very much." So, I believe this is cream soda. Very nice. I need a drink after that. The caramel is quite... Oh, goodness. It's not easy to talk and eat caramel at the same time. Do you ever, like, try to talk with peanut butter on the roof of your mouth? It's sort of like that. The nougat and the oh. It's very good, don't get me wrong, but it's hard to speak. So, he said, "Alex Lover, you are the chosen one. You are the only one who can save us from this imminent danger." I remember it like it was yesterday. What was the, do you remember what the problem was?
Corporate takeover.
That's right! It was a giant corporate takeover of the entire city. They had all these they had all these lines drawn around certain areas. There was like a big McDonald's sign on one, and there was, Wendy's, and it almost looked like gang territory. The way it was marked out. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if I was walking along the street one day and I looked into that that alley, you know the one. And there was this giant yellow M spray painted on the wall. So I noticed this, and there was Wendy's, and there was McDonald's, and there was Burger King, and there was KFC, and the four of them were vying over this one piece of land in the middle. It was a monument, but it escapes me. Do you remember what monument it was?
Smokey the Bear.
Smokey the Bear was hanging out in the middle of town, and he was currently holding off all of the corporations from trying to take over the park. So he said, Smokey the Bear, our agent Smokey the Bear, is on the scene right now, and he's currently talking to men in suits about why only they can prevent forest fires. And so he tells me, you have to be ready to do whatever it takes. And I said, that's a tall order because I only met you, earlier, and you're still pointing that knife at me. He said, oh, sorry, and he put the knife away. So he told me, you are the only one who can stop them, because in your father's will, there is a line that says you are the rightful heir to the park. However, when your father died, the will was scattered into 3 parts across the world. And so we need to go get them to stop the corporate takeover of the entire city. Because once the people see one person stand up to these evil corporations, they will be inspired to do the same, and there will be a revolution. It will be incredible. And so he brings me to this. He brings me to the park where Smokey the Bear is, talking to these men in suits, and they had suitcases, and I don't know why, because they didn't have them open or anything, even though they were discussing business. In fact, the way they were moving them around made it seem like they were pretty light. But upon seeing me, they suddenly pulled something out of their briefcases. You remember what it was, right?
Stuffed giraffes.
They were 2 stuffed giraffes. And they pulled them out of the suitcase and they pointed them at me and they said, Alex Lover, you will not get this park. And I said, well, I will, because, it's in my father's will. That's kind of how the law works. It's sort of a thing that my father's dying wishes should be presented. And he moves towards me holding the stuffed giraffe, having no time for my explanations on the legal system. And I put my hands up because even though that is a stuffed giraffe, he's making really threatening motions with it. I don't know. These people, they're corporations. I'm sure they have research and development that sort of makes, I don't know, neat gadgets of some variety. This isn't exactly a normal situation. Well, it is for me, but it's not a normal situation for anybody else. And so I remember the 2 of them were about to take me hostage when Smokey said, "Stop! You've left your campfire unattended." And the 2 businessmen looked kind of sad, oh, I've disappointed Smokey. Because nobody wants to disappoint Smokey the Bear. And so the 2 of them return to their campfire to, put it out and, put some rocks around it so that it doesn't spread to the nearby park. And Smokey the Bear pulls me aside and he goes, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Well, the first piece of the will is here. The really creepy guy with an eye patch whose name I forgot to ask told me." And Smokey the Bear says, "You're right. It's just over this way." And he points into the woods. And I say, "Okay, well, I suppose I should go over there then." And so I head into the woods, and Smokey the Bear says, I'll hold them off, don't worry about it. I'll dodge questions expertly. And so I have to say, a spoon is much more suited for eating these. And so I dive into the forest on my own. I don't remember why the man with the knife had to leave me. Do you remember?
You had to go get butter sculptures.
Really? Because he had to go get butter sculptures. It was very integral to the plan, and I don't remember why. Really? I suppose that is the first thing that came to your mind.
Hasn't kicked in.
The caffeine hasn't kicked in. That's fair. So, he was off getting butter statues, so I had to delve into the woods alone, and as I walked through the trees, I admired the beauty of nature for a moment. It really dawned on me that these evil corporations should not be taking over parks. That kind of defeats the purpose of having a public park. Although it was not public, it was privately owned, but we allowed people to go on them because it's a good community service, and it's not like my father was using the land for anything. So I go into the forest and I meet an unusual-looking character. He was some kind of creature, a fantasy creature of some kind. But what it is, it eludes me. Do you remember what?
Screaming goat.
Trash gremlin.
Hobgoblin.
He was a hobgoblin. And this hobgoblin, hobgoblins are like normal goblins, but they're a little bit taller. So he had this green skin, and he had these long, weird, gangly ears, and one of them was pierced with like 7 piercings, and I was like, man, that's really impressive. Like, I admire that. That's a dedication to a look right there. And so he took me aside into the forest, and he's like, I know who you are. You're Alex Lover, but you're not going to get past me unless you answer the riddle. And I don't remember what the riddle was off the top of my head, but I do remember the answer. No, I don't remember the answer. Do you remember the answer?
42.
The answer to the riddle was 42. And so this goblin asked me, there's a long sought ancient wisdom in our time of what truly is the meaning of life. And so I said, oh, that one's easy, it's 42. I read about it somewhere, I don't remember where. I think it was from this guide. There's this guide to like exploring the cosmos and everything. It was really interesting. And so, gosh, I really should stop talking while I'm eating a candy bar. I should have learned my lesson the first time. And so he goes, oh, well, I suppose you're entirely correct then. That makes a lot of sense. It's not arbitrary in any way, shape, or form. And so he leads me, he steps aside and gestures onward into the forest, and I enter the forest, and there's this big, giant treasure chest, and I'm like, wow, he really hid his will in that? That's kind of tacky, isn't it? Do you think it's tacky?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
Be careful, it could be a mimic.
It was a mimic. The moment I laid my hand on the chest sort of started purring. And so I was like, oh, that's not good. And I started, gently petting the mimic, I suppose it was. In order to, I don't want to be on its bad side. It eats people who are seeking its contents. That's the purpose of a mimic. It looks like something but it's actually something else that wants to devour you. It's not a good thing by any stretch of the imagination. So I start petting this mimic, and the mimic sort of makes this weird sort of bubbly noise, and then goes, and it spits out a piece of the will.
Yay.
And so I pick it up, and I'm like, I have the first piece of the will. I open it up, and it's still a little bit soggy, and that's not a good thing. So I read it, and it tells me of the location of the second piece of the will, and I go, onward to
Taco Bell.
Bedroom.
Taco Bell. It was the Taco Bell, deep in KFC territory. There is a single Taco Bell in the middle of this giant stretch of KFC themed buildings. There's red and white everywhere, and people in these weird, sort of awful white suits. And so I went back. Well, first I went back to the factory, the old abandoned factory that none of the corporations had taken a foothold in, and I said, sir, because I'd never asked his name. I said, sir, I've found the piece. I've found where the next piece of the will is, but it's deep in KFC territory. And he looks me dead in the eyes and says, "You'll have to go undercover." And I said, "No, I am not putting on a white suit. I could not pull that off. Are you kidding me? Those things are super expensive, and if you get them dirty, like at all." Oh, is this the bill?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
I know I've asked this before, and it seems really silly for me to now forget this, but you had a job. You have a job. What is it?
Cashier at KFC.
Right. You were a cashier at KFC. And so I'm deep in KFC territory, and I walk in to this Taco Bell, and I go, "I am Alex Lover, and I'm here for the second part of the will." And on second thought, that was a really bad thing to declare out loud, because I immediately got jumped by 3 KFC goons who had mustaches that curled sort of like that. And they took me to this bunker underground, and they said, "Alex Lever, you're not getting out of this one." And this KFC, the basement was in a KFC, because of course. And I remember as they were dragging me by the arms, I looked into your eyes, and I saw the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. And I only wished that we could have met on better terms. And so they dragged me into the basement, and I thought all hope was lost, because they tossed me in this cell with a bunch of chickens. Because they didn't have any proper cells or anything. They were a chicken joint. I don't know what you're expecting. And so they put me in there, and I think all hope is lost. I'll never save the park. I'll never save the city. And there I see you, and you have the key, and you unlock it, and you say, I saw your face, and I thought that you were the most handsome person I've ever seen. And it really touched me, you know. I really felt that. And I said, "Well, what if they catch you? Now that you've unlocked me, they're going to know it was you." And so you said, "Well, I hadn't thought this far ahead, honestly." And so we headed out of the KFC basement, and I remember we snuck out, and we had we grabbed the second part of the will on the way out, and I remember after that it led to the third part of the will, which is this really, really romantic getaway on the other side of the planet, but I forget where.
Bermuda.
In Bermuda.
The triangle specifically.
Yes, the Bermuda Triangle. It was in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle was the last piece of my father's will. And so we had this really romantic boat ride that I will treasure for the rest of my life. And I'm sorry I puked on you. I'm not good with boats. Seasickness is my middle name. And so we got the last piece of the will, and I said, "This is it. We can save our city." And so we headed back with all three parts of the will, and we had a lawyer read it out loud and everything. And I said, "Yes." And he said, "But there's one key component that your father requested." And he said, "He needs you to eat an entire butter statue on your own." And so I put on my bib. Yes, thank you. I was not trying to call it a bib, but yes, that's what it is. It was a bib. Thanks. I'm really touchy about that. I wish you wouldn't bring it up like that. Yes, it was a bib. So what? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to lash out or anything. No, it's no. I have issues with talking too much, and sometimes when I talk, my emotions get the best of me, and oh, well, you know what happened next. You helped me eat the butter statue, and we found the third part of the will, and we saved the city, and even if you leave me now, I'll never forget that moment. Goodbye. I suppose I'm left with the bill, aren't I? Well, I wonder where the waitstaff is. I wonder if I can flag him down next time. Oh, that was a great misadventure, honestly. Being able to go to the Bermuda Triangle, have a romantic evening. I got to pet a mimic. That doesn't happen often. Like I said, I don't think I'll ever forget that. I do have to pay for my bill. I do wonder where the waitstaff is.
I'm sorry. He had to leave on a family emergency. I can take care of it. I'm right here.
You look a lot less hairy than my last waiter. Oh, I see. All right. Well, I'll take. I'll get a box. Thanks. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I guess I'll eat this on the way out then. This has been a wonderful evening. I only wish it could have ended better, but it is what it is. I'm taking this.
Table for one with Alex Lover, everyone.